That's it?
I'm gonna play some other songs.
Oh, wait, we got a minute here till we,
Okay. And when you're ready, you want us to unmute the displays?
yeah. I think you see this. Okay. Okay, has everybody got their folder that's once a folder? You got yours, James? Good to go. Jess, you got yours? Mr. Moltz? You got yours?
I said that.
Okay, please, you ready, Nick? Put your cell phones down and let's go through some housekeeping things. You have your folders, so please start tallying up your points. Add those up. My math tells me there's 123 points for the class. This also includes March 23rd. That's the day we had a speaker not show up. Remember? Okay. Then circle your points on the front of your folder so I can kind of figure it out. Then as we talked, I will drop the lowest in-class assignment. And I'm still talking to students about some things that might have been missing. Questions on that? No. 3 exam days, I would think that would be 100% attendance, so there should be no motivation. The motivation on that should have been internal. So that's how I came up with 123. Okay, other questions? The final is comprehensive. Jared, come on in and get your folder at the end of class. Okay. 80 questions, 1.2 points each. Same format that we've had all semester. 50 points group, 30 points individual. Pick your own teams, but I like maximum 4 on a team. And that'll be in class. This room right here. And I believe that's the correct time. I just went online to check that. Okay. Same format as before. There is, open up your folder and there is a study guide in there. I'm trying to make that easy for you. Maybe you're not concerned about that, I don't know. Then check on KSOL on Sunday because I'll be working, polishing up the final. There's still things I want to do to it and make some changes to it. And I'll probably be in here. If you want to stop in and see me and talk, I'll be in here probably Sunday afternoon, probably starting at 2 o'clock. Okay? Other questions about the final? It's the same format. I mean, you're going to get a Scantron card, and if you don't like how the rest of the group goes, it's your life. Do what you want to do. Okay? Okay, I asked some people to come in here today because this is the last time I'm going to do this. This is what I talked about all semester. Set guidelines and try like mad to stick to them because you want to make me change. Try to keep it short and simple. I learn a lot from students. Listen and then listen some more. I think I do that. I try to anyways. Just find a seat. Your music, I don't know everything about your music, but it's your music. So sometimes when you don't want to play your music, you have to listen to my music. Remember this. For me, Indiana, Pennsylvania. Small town about the size of Manhattan in western Pennsylvania. And those that know anything about sports, Slippery Rock University is now and then you'll see that on advertised during football season. Well, Slippery Rock did this and Slippery Rock did that. Yes, it is a small university. We played them in football and basketball, and it's part of the small colleges in western Pennsylvania. My roots, my dad, Dick Pacey, mother Henry, named after my granddaddy. That's for real, Patrick Henry. And when my mother would be irritated at me, she would use my full name. And I was named for my granddad because when my mother was pregnant with me, she lived in Gallup, New Mexico, and my granddad drove all the way across the country to come down and pick her up and take her back to Indiana. And you'll find out why in a second. So she felt so compelled to name me after her daddy. His name was actually Herman, but everybody called him Pat. And he was a coal mine foreman. And both of my families have coal mining backgrounds. And those of you, I don't think anybody in here had any coal mining in your family, but this would be a typical small town in western Pennsylvania, and actually they're called patch houses. And you can see they're all alike, and they're all in a row. And the coal mine usually built the houses and would rent them to the coal miners, and the coal company would actually have a general store that they would sell things to the coal miners. So the money never left the community. And it was a model, though. It worked. You can see how it looks today. Well, not really today, but this is actually a small town, and I picked Clymer because that's one of the small towns that my mother lived in. You can see it's up here because her dad, Pat Henry, would move around to all these different coal mines because when the coal ran out, they would move, and that town would kind of dry up a little bit. You can see where Indiana is, and my dad actually came from Blairsville. And there's another small town. Howwood, Alverta, McEntee, these are small coal mining towns, and if you went there today, there would probably be 2 or 3 houses. But this was a dirty, dirty industry, and you really wanted to have a college education or have some type of education because at an early age, you would be destined to work in the coal mines. My dad came from a family of 11, and my mother had a family of 12. And interesting fact about my mother's family, she had 2 sets of identical twins. Where's Jane Marshall? Are you here? Jane, she was here. 2 sets of identical twins. And my one aunt, my Aunt Jean, came to an event we had last week. But 2 sets. And sometimes I'd walk up to my aunt and I'd start talking to her as my mother, and she'd look at me and she'd say, "Get out of here. I'm not your mother." They were so close, but when I looked at them, I said, "Oh, yeah." So I'd have people call me up and say, "Is your mother down in Washington, D.C. now?" So that was really interesting. There's Howwood today. Now, what I learned from my parents growing up. Patrick, life is not fair. What did he mean by that? He was in the Army in Gallup, New Mexico, and got the flu and went to the infirmary, and they gave him an injection of sulfa drugs. He was allergic to sulfa drugs. Totally paralyzed from the neck down for 3 years. No physical therapy as we know it today. Never complained, never used that for an excuse, but he'd tell me, life is not fair. Interesting thing, this is what he got, this Guillain-Barré syndrome, which is, they know much more about it now than they did then. He had a college degree in accounting. No one would hire him. Talk about being prejudiced. And he did taxes for people, and his mind was real good, but when I was real young, he got a job in a bowling alley with the Catholic Church, and that's the only people that would hire him at that time. He used to tell me, pay your bills. I'd come home from college, and he'd say, your bill's paid. Then the other thing he told me, be honest and tell the truth. My mama, a little bit different. She would tell me, and one time when I was growing up, I had this job, and you'll laugh, trimming trees. And those were really good jobs then because it paid $1.25. And the first couple days I was there, it was miserable because it would be like cornfields. There'd be long rows of these trees in western Pennsylvania where the government came in and said, look, they did strip mining then, where they would take the coal off the top of the soil and they would just leave it. So you would go and you drive around the countryside, and here you'd see these fields that had coal and soil, and it just looked terrible. So they said, okay, you got to do something with these fields. So they found out that Christmas trees just thrived. So they planted them like corn rows. So in the summertime, you would have to trim Christmas trees. So Indiana actually became the Christmas tree capital of the world at that time. So I think I was a sophomore in high school, maybe a junior. So all my buddies and everything, we said, okay, we're going to go trim Christmas trees. So we did that, and I came back, and the second day, eating supper, and I mentioned to my mother that I was going to be done with trimming trees at the end of the week. And she left the table and came back, and she said, where are you going to eat? And I looked at her and I said, well, I usually eat right here, Mama. And she said, no, you're not. She said, if you quit that job, don't show up for supper. And I looked at her and I thought she was serious. 20, 30 years later, I mentioned that to her, and she looked at me and she says, I don't remember that. Think about, I know I do some things, and you come to me and I don't remember. That's the other thing she said to me. Support yourself. I'll show you why she said that. This is the other thing. The pressure to do what's right. Your whole life would revolve around the supper table and what you didn't do. It's never yelling, but just, okay, tell me about this and tell me about that. Here's the interesting thing, and this is why my mother was worried about me getting a job. Much like some of you, when I ask you about the size of your classes and everything, I was in the bottom part of this. I thought I was going to go to industrial arts school in eastern Pennsylvania. Not that I was clueless. I was clueless, and I know sometimes when I fuss at students, I think you have so much talent. Sometimes you just don't realize it. I'm sorry. So here I was, Williamsport area technical college, ready to go. And this was at the height of the Vietnam conflict. And I mean, here I am, a young person. I'm clueless. I know there's this conflict in Vietnam. Me going? No, I'm not doing that. Turning point in my life. And grade school, parochial school friend, Mike Kinner, who's interesting now. Mike is an apothecary down in Florida and has a couple patents on things. And but he called me up and he said, "Your name's on a list." I said, "What list?" He said, "You're going to get drafted." So I said, "Oh my God!" And I said, "Mike, what are you doing?" He said, "I'm going to go in the Navy." And I thought to myself, yeah, I'd rather be in the Navy than in the Army because you can get shot at. And so I went down with Mike and we drove in a car and we got down there and we enlisted. And then they said, okay, you're going to start going to meetings. And then they said, you're going to go, after 2 years, you're going to go be in active duty. So I sat there and I went home and I think I talked to my mother and I said, well, I have this option to go and get my duty done and I could put my name in and I can go in December, and she looked at me and she said, well, you'll miss Christmas. And I said, well, so what? Look at the other side of it. I'll be home. And she said, yeah, good idea. So we agreed and I shipped out right before Christmas. And I mean, that wasn't fun, but I thought, that's the thing to do. So, okay. So, wow. And you think living in a dormitory is bad. But this was a great time because there was all these educated people that were enlisted people. It's a little bit different now. I mean, you had a lot of high school dropouts and things like that. So this was a very intelligent workforce. And it was, as my wife would say, it was the best thing that ever happened to me. "19 years old. That was my service number, B480549. I can remember that and remember that. So I had to drive to Johnstown, Pennsylvania, which is actually another larger coal mining town. So I enlisted there, and wow, and they issued me this card. Okay, here I am, 20 years old, and remember, this is December, and I said, okay, I really had my basic training up in the Great Lakes, and that was an interesting thing, too, because the base got food poisoning while I was there. I mean, food poisoning, and you're talking 10,000 men have food poisoning. So you would just sit there and wait till it was your turn to get sick. I mean, it was terrible. But it was a great experience because maybe that was the start of my thinking, okay, food service, why did this happen and all that? And wow. So the other thing, I was given a ticket. I had never been on a plane. And they said, sailor, go find your ship. So I got on a plane in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And you got to understand that this was the Vietnam War, and I was on this ship, and I'll show you in a second. It was a small ship. And it would go here, it would go there. And I mean, here I was. I would show up in this city, and I would go down to the pier and look for my ship, and somebody would say, well, it left this morning, or it was here 2 days ago. So I was, for 2 weeks, I was living out of a duffel bag and was running out of money. And talk about culture shock. I remember getting on a train. It was in Taiwan, Formosa, I guess, at that time, and went to the train station, and I needed to get a train ticket to go from Taipei to Kaohsiung, which was like 300 miles. And I went up to the window, and I remembered still to this day, there was some young students in class, and they came up to me, and they were so nice, and they helped me get the train ticket because they wanted to work on their English. They were so nice. And I got in this train. They got me the cheapest ticket on this train, and here I sat on this train with cows, ducks, and sheep, all around me. And the people were so nice. They would come up, and it was tea at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and they would give me this tea. And I thought, wow. And I don't know what they were talking about, but I mean, it was quite an adventure. So again, 2 weeks chasing my first duty ship, and it was the USS Nicholas. I didn't know it at the time. This is a World War II ship. It was the oldest ship on our Navy. I spent a year on the Nicholas and I grew up. Pearl Harbor. I spent a year at Pearl Harbor. And worst thing I ever did, I never visited the Arizona. I was young. I mean, everybody would go out there and, now I would think that would be my first stop. There it is. Now, this is a small ship. This is not a big ship. This is a small ship. They refer to as a tin can. I had the lowest of the lowest positions. I was a bosun's mate. And a bosun's mate does all the guerrilla work on the ship, painting it, doing anything. We'd port, and I would be responsible for getting those lines on the shore and tying it up and all that. So I had a great time. Toured a lot of countries, and I'll show you. My first job was a bosun's mate, and then I was a cook's helper. And this was my first experience with food service, and I loved it. Because A.V. Hartman was my buddy. He was the cook, and I would go in and work, and I worked real hard, and that's not a place where people would gravitate to, work in the kitchen. They'd want to get out of there. But I liked it. A.V., I would go in, and he'd say, "What do you want to eat?" When he started doing that, I said, I looked at the menu, and I said, "We're having this and this." He says, "No, what do you want to eat?" So I would be sitting there eating things that I wanted to eat, and people would walk by, and they'd say, "Oh, it looks like we're having steak for supper." And then they would show up, and they'd say, "Where's the steak?" You never screwed with A.V. I mean, he was the lead cook. You never talked back to him or anything, or he'd screw up your food. But I got to eat everything I wanted. And I mean, the reason that, this is kind of funny, that's all we talked about is Lone Star beer. Later on, you're shaking your head. I didn't know that. But this, to me, wow, A.V. was really good to me. And I learned a lot from A.V. Because he had gone to some certificate schools. He was a hard worker. Get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and he asked me to get up to help him, and I would. But, I had an easier life on that ship once I started working with A.V., and I think I was supposed to do that for 2 or 3 months, and then he came to me and says, "You want to stay longer?" And I said, "Why not?" I had a good duty. That was good duty. There I was, 68. And my mother, at that time, I did call her on the phone, and she was so worried about me where I was going to spend Christmas. And little did we know, but somebody had written me a letter, and somebody from my hometown, close to my hometown, had duty out in Pearl Harbor, and I spent Christmas at their home. And it was really nice, and I got to spend time with some other people. But here on the Nicholas, we had spent a lot of time off the coast of Vietnam, and I had done some crazy things in terms of not thinking about my safety, but I had left. I got orders to go on another ship. So I went from the oldest ship in the Navy to the newest ship in the Navy. This was like night and day. It was so cold, the air conditioning was so cold on this Biddle that I had to get a wool blanket to put around my feet. It was amazing, but I had experienced both ends of it. And immediately when I came on the Biddle, I was a seasoned veteran at 21 or so. And here are all these young other men that hadn't seen combat. And I didn't, they were talking to me, combat, what about this and what about that? I just, it was part of life. And immediately they gave me the 50 caliber machine gun because they thought I knew what I was doing. Oh, geez. The hardest part about that was I had to take that gun apart every day and clean out the seawater, or not seawater, but salt. So that was my gun, and I had manned that. And I guess because I had patrolled, they looked at my record. Here's a bosun's mate, and I go on this ship. No one on this ship had been to Vietnam. They had just come over, and they looked at me like, oh, geez. They gave me this mortar to fire, so I did that. So it was kind of interesting. And at that time, too, I was what the Navy calls a shellback. And I had gone over the equator, and I was 3 of 300 that were shellbacks on that ship. And the shellbacks, the Navy initiates anybody that doesn't go across the equator, and they make them from a polywog to a shellback. So I spent a day harassing, terrorizing all these other sailors that we needed to initiate. So that was interesting. Here I am, and this is the ship's party, and this is Nagasaki, Japan. Here's the interesting thing about this. Here's the lesson on this. This was about 35 years ago. Buzz Thoman, who is from Topeka, I go on the website of the Biddle and I'm playing around, and here's Buzz's name comes up as in Topeka, Kansas. Shipmate of mine. He was another bosun's mate, had a rack right across from me. Great guy. And then another great guy is Joe. He died a couple years ago. But here's the other interesting thing. Here's Dr. Tim Dietz, who's an Auburn grad. Buzz knew him. He was coming up here to the Auburn game, and I met Dr. Dietz for the first time in 40 years. So it's kind of interesting because now, it was so funny at Christmas time, there's this group of Biddle people, and they're tweeting and things like that, and they tweeted, "Where are the professors? Where are the professors?" You know, I guess they were calling me and Dr. Dietz the professors. So that was kind of funny. But you just never know who you're going to meet and who's going to have an influence on your life. I won the most colorful beard contest. And that was what they referred to as a monotony breaker. Because beards from this captain were, no, you don't do beards. I mean, this was a pretty sophisticated ship. The captain was Malin T. Scott, was a real taskmaster. And that was pretty amazing. But this is what I learned in the Navy. America is a great country. I learned this. Here's a little boy from Western Pennsylvania. A lot of the ages that are in here. Mozambique. We went out to dinner one night, a bunch of us, and our wait staff got beat. We saw, he was in the back there, and we saw the owner beating him, and we were so concerned. We went back, and the guy finally came out, and we saw him as we were leaving, and he said, the owner didn't like that I didn't talk to you fast enough, or I didn't understand something. Talk about harassment. This is poverty. The poverty, I wasn't used to it. I couldn't believe it. We took a field trip when I was in Taiwan, up in the mountains. Actually, it was a orphanage. This is on our way up there. We walked up there. I couldn't believe it. People lived there. But then, one of the great things about being in the Navy, you get to tour a lot of glamorous places, and our captain, Malin T. Scott, had a lot of connections, and we went to a lot of nice places. Copenhagen, Portugal, let's see, let's name a couple, but we went to Hong Kong. My first time in Hong Kong. And that was when the British had control of it. So you look up, we're coming in, and I asked the chief bosun's mate, "What's all that up there? We're going in on the ship. What's that up there?" And I had this camera that I bought in Japan. It was really a good camera, and I could zoom in on all this stuff. He says, "Oh, that's where people live." I said, "What?" There were thousands of people living in cardboard boxes. I couldn't believe it. I thought to myself, no. But this is how tourists see Hong Kong. That isn't the end of it. Typically, a group of 40 to 50 men in the first division would paint and take care of the ship. But our chief bosun's mate worked out this deal with these homeless ladies, to paint our ship so we can do R&R. And we wouldn't have to worry about that. And we thought that was a great idea. And so this was amazing. We go in there, and they're cleaning the sides. I mean, they did a better job than what we would do. I mean, we saw what they were doing, and I thought, geez. When I got up in the morning, they were there. I mean, here I am getting ready to go on Liberty, and they're out there cleaning the ship, and they have these long poles. And then somebody told me, I didn't see it, somebody said, well, that little barge that they're on, that didn't go in at night. I said, what do you mean? They slept there all night. Oh, that couldn't be. No, they would have to go in. I mean, it was dark, and they kept on working. Here's the worst part about this. Down in the mess decks, there was somebody strange in the pantry, the scullery, where we put your dirty plate. There was 2 or 3 of these ladies in there, and I thought, they must be working in the dish room. So somebody, I think it was the second day, somebody came to me and said, that's part of their pay. What? The food we don't eat. And I couldn't believe it. I said, no, what do you mean? He said, well, that's part of the deal that they worked out. They wanted the scraps off of our plates. I mean, so I went back there. I think the third day I got triple servings. I wouldn't eat it. I got more food than I ever wanted, and I ate some of it, and I'd take it back there and give it to them. They were back there with spatulas separating all the peas, the carrots, and the chicken or whatever in big garbage cans with plastic bags. If that happened today, there would probably be on news. But that's the way it was. So right away I thought, holy hell. And I had a great time in Hong Kong. I mean, Hong Kong, if you ever get to visit, that's a great city to go to. You could actually get at that time, anything made that you want. You would take a picture in and say, can you make this? They wouldn't say yes or no. They'd say, when do you want it? Shoes, watches. I mean, I had friends write me and say, pick me up so-and-so and so-and-so. I mean, I got jewelry. I didn't even know what I was getting, and like $5 or $10. But there they were, and I mean, this was quite a shock. My Navy experience, I had a safe and secure environment. I had lots of opportunities, and Tom, that was my $250. Of course, tuition wasn't what it is today. 21 years of age. And I'm not standing up here bragging, but this was my first year in college. I learned a lot. Somebody would ask me, where you been? And I'd make a comment, around the world. You know, and I'd say, oh, yeah, oh. But maybe I gravitated to young people at that time, but there's a favorite picture of mine. So, get out of the service, GI Bill, 2 best friends which would love to do what I do. Work with students. Grades weren't good enough. Maybe that's why I fuss at you. Grades weren't good enough. Went to Indiana University of Pennsylvania because I couldn't get in, really, so I had to go to the 4-year or 2-year school. I mean, I was not a pleasant person to be around because I would really focus on things and grades, and that was really important to me. And this is another thing. I was a non-traditional student, but I didn't know it. And because of my Navy experience, I majored in foods and nutrition. That was at that school, and it was a good department. The enrollment, food and institutional management side, I graduated in a class of 27. There's Mrs. Berthy. She was one of my instructors. There's me. And there I am again, and boy, What has happened? There I am too. I love my purchasing class with Alan Woods, my food production with Betty Berthy. I enjoyed my classes. However, I wasn't sure I would ever graduate because I guess I was just, I wanted to graduate, but yet I had a 3.2. And again, just like a lot of you, I wasn't sure really what I wanted to do, but I had some instructors that said, well, why don't you think about graduate school? And I was old enough at the time, but Alan Woods was a big influence on my life, and he's the one, and a lot of you come into me, and you're having problems with the class, and I know I've told some of you, just drop it. Just drop it and refocus. You're not doing well, pull back. And he told me that, and I couldn't believe it. I said, well, I have to take this class. He said, you're not ready, you're stressed, you're not doing well, you can drop it, drop it. Great advice. Here I am on graduation and headed to Purdue University. I was at Purdue 1 week, and I really wasn't sure, and I had a really good advisor at Purdue, and he kind of thought that maybe I wasn't ready yet, and I wasn't. I needed some more work experience, and he, along with a friend, John Henney, who used to be here years ago, he had a NACUFS internship in Nebraska, and he told me, he said, there's a position up there, and they wanted me to apply for it, but why don't you apply for it? So I leave Nebraska and go to Lincoln, Nebraska, and in September, and any of you know, and this was, I was clueless, big-time football and all this, because I come from a small school in western Pennsylvania. I was the food production coordinator. That's my pay. This is what you'd probably make in the summer. My management responsibilities, I managed 2 300-seat cafeterias, 10 vending machines, and we owned those vending machines, so I'd have to clean them at Christmas. A sit-down restaurant, lots of catering because my boss loved to do catering, and that was my work week. I didn't mind. What I learned, food production, catering knowledge, working with different personalities. Evelyn the cook. I was the only white guy that showed up to her mama's funeral. I could do nothing wrong after that. And I looked around that room. If you've ever been in that situation, you look at things differently. But she kissed my rear end after that because I paid homage to her and her mama. Wayne was a limited learner. Mrs. Clancy, she was my immediate supervisor, and she always made sure that I had a place to go to eat a meal. And she was a dietitian, and she was a graduate of Kansas State, and she thought that would be a good fit for me. So there I am, a young guy with Mrs. Clancy. So, toured KSU on a business trip, and this is another lesson. A lot of times you'll come in my office and you'll say, I didn't get the job. And I usually tell you, hang in there, keep on going. Right, Sandra? Just keep on going. And they told me there was no jobs. I got this letter. 3 weeks later, they asked me to apply again. Somebody left. Position opened up. This is when I started. Why did I get the job? What I want you to do is interview them. It's your life. Just don't sit there and ask questions. Later, I asked a lot of questions, and they said maybe you asked too many, but I was concerned. My first job, I was at Derby Dining. This is another really important person in my life, Helen McManus, because she put up with me. I learned more food production. I learned professionalism. She was very professional. Human resource skills, and I would get so irritated with her. I wanted her to make a decision, and she'd say, Mr. Pacey, just wait, just wait. And I'd say, what are we waiting for? And she would say, just wait. And 9 times out of 10, she was right. Things happened. It turned out. So I had the distinction of working in every dining hall on campus. There I am in '86. There's Mark Edwards. There's my mentor, Mrs. McManus. Garland Lewis just retired this year too. Janet Maxwell, her daughter is a graduate of our program. She graduated 2 or 3 years ago. 1990. That was the year, Dean, that you can cut a deal. I didn't want to leave dining. I liked my job, but Judy Miller, who was the department head, she said, just come over for a year. She worked it out with Barbara Stowe, the dean then. She said, you're going to be an interim dean, or interim, I just moved up, interim director. And Judy Miller was our department head, and she said, if you don't like it, you can go back. Dr. Miller, she took on the tough issues. This is the thing I've talked to you about all semester. She was a good listener. She asked your input. And she listened. Sometimes she did nothing because she was still listening. And she was fair. I learned that too. If you do your work, and she was fair. Some people didn't like her, but I thought, oh, okay. Let's see if I can do this.
I've been searching a long time.
This is the truth.
Someone
My mama would be so annoyed because I'd get in the car and drive back to myself.
I've been traveling all around,
Ruth, she got her PhD on Friday. We got married on
waiting for you
Sunday.
to come.
What a weekend.
Someone like you,
Best thing I ever did in my life.
make it all worthwhile.
My dad be my best.
Someone like you,
Best thing.
keep me satisfied. Someone exactly like you.
A lot of questions. So when your parents asked you questions and I wasn't ready, I
I've been
wasn't ready for all
traveling.
the questions. I only hope that you find the right person. What's important? Professionalism. Inspire students to become self-learners. Strive to create environments in which students want to do good. Build student leaders. Seek to understand and reason. I like to negotiate with you. I might not agree with you, but I like to negotiate with you. And this is the other thing. You have to provide a climate where people want to do good. You. This is what I believe you want. I do a good job of telling you when you haven't done well. I know that. And sometimes I'm not considerate of your feelings. I know that. I have some improvements to do there. I know that. But this is what I think you want and people want. Approachable and willing to listen. I also feel it's important to give back. To share what you can do well. Look at me. I'm going to keep on going. Thank you for putting up with me. Thank you, sir. Let me finish with one thought, and Dr. Sauer here, where's he? Dr. Sauer, is he? Kevin's here, but, I'm not a great person, but years ago, Dr. Sauer, and he was a student in my class, he had written this paper. It was good. It was a good paper. But I had written on it, you could do better. He still holds me hostage to that to this day. you could do better. And I could do better. I wish I could have done better. And let me finish with this story. Doc B and I were driving back from Nashville at the time, and we drive through Memphis. And Memphis is an interesting town because there's some really bad areas of Memphis, and you want to stay away from those. So we were driving through Memphis, and we stopped at this one gas station we always stop at. 2 reasons. Cheap gas, but they also have pecan beer, Mississippi pecan beer, and Doc B likes that. I like it too. So we stopped there and get some gas, and I go in and get the beer, and I started the gas thing, and she's in her car there, and I come back, and here is a car that I didn't notice when I first went in. It's parked right beside the pumps, and the front tire is completely flat. So I'm there pumping gas, and I go around to her side, and I say, "What's that car back there?" And she said, "It was back there when you got out, too." But I was so hell-bent on getting the beer. And I come back, and I'm pumping the gas, and I notice, and here is a young black gal in that car on her cell phone crying. And I look, and her tire's flat. When I went in there, the men in the convenience store were kind of making jokes or whatever about the flat tire and all that. So I went over to the window, and the window was half down, and she was crying in there. I said, "What's going on?" She said, "My cell phone is just about dead, and I can't get so-and-so to come and help me. They're at work, and they can't get off." And I went back. I said, "Well, wait a second." I went back to Doc B, and I said, "I'm going to change your tire." She said, "You're going to do that?" I said, "I'm going to try." So she coached me. We got out of there, and, I do the things, and she kind of coaches me. So the gal got out of her car, and I didn't know it. And again, we don't see everything. One of her legs was deformed, and what do you call it when you have a fake leg? What is that called? Not a real leg. What? Yeah, okay. So I didn't notice that. And she was so thankful, and I went to the trunk, and I started changing this tire. And here's how bad it was. I put the lug wrench on, and it just spun around. And she said, "Oh, yeah." So she went to the glove compartment and got out this fitting and gave it to me and said, "Here, put that on." So I put that on. Ooh, worked. So I was there changing the bolts, and then I got to another one, and it spun. She says, "Oh, yeah." So she went to the glove box again and got another fitting. This was she lived in a bad part of town, and she had the wherewithal to have different lugs on there because she didn't want her tires taken. So here I am, and we get that going, and we're talking to her, and the could do better part. Doc B's talking to her about what she wants to do. She wants to help young people. She's gone to school, and here are all the things that we know about a university and all the network we have. And we didn't get her name. We could help her more. And then the worst part about it is we're driving. We get her going, change the tire, shake her hand, and leave. And we're driving down the road, and I said to Doc B, I said, "Wonder if she has gas." I had $20 in my pocket. I could have done better. And to this day, we still say, "I wonder who that young gal is at that." And when we drive through there, I look. Not that I expect to see her. But think about that. You think you do good, but you could always do better. And I'm a good example of it. So let's get you out of here, and thanks for coming.